I was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder in 2018, and this is what you need to know. Most people reference DID as multiple personality disorder because this is what the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual that defines the criteria for diagnosing mental health disorders, used to call DID. That is, until 1994, with the release of the fourth edition of the DSM that renamed multiple personality disorder as dissociative identity disorder. None of us are born with a single cohesive identity. When we're infants, toddlers, children, we have no idea who we are. We have very little self-awareness as children. And what little identity we do have is taken from our association with our intimate social group, which is typically our caregivers, like our parents or our guardians. Those of you without dissociative identity disorder slowly begin to develop a single identity as you age. But those of us with DID experience such an extreme amount of trauma in our childhoods that we dissociate from ourselves and fail to develop a single identity. Instead, our identity remains fragmented. And these split parts of our identity become alters, which is a term for alternate states of identity within a DID system. This is the traumagenic or trauma model of DID. In short, basically, DID systems experience such severe and repeated trauma before the ages of around 5 to 6, and sometimes, in some cases, before 7 to 8. Instead of becoming one person, as a result of this trauma, we become multiple people, at least 2 or more alters, or in my system's case, way more than that. Don't get me wrong here. Everyone can, will, or probably already has experienced dissociation at some point in your life. Dissociation is a natural automatic response that happens when you go through a traumatic event. This traumatic event could be something like a car crash, a death in the family, or it could be abuse. But not everyone who experiences trauma or dissociates develops DID. DID specifically develops in children as a result of repeated childhood trauma. Dissociation is a survival mechanism. And for those of us with DID, it's the only reason we were able to survive our trauma. Without my system, I wouldn't be alive. DID is a disorder because it makes everyday functioning a lot harder, and sometimes it makes it impossible. I wouldn't give up my system for the world because the people in my system are the reason that I am still alive. But don't think for 1 second that we all didn't wish that we were single people in our own bodies, living our own separate lives, instead of forced to coexist in a system in one body for survival. It makes me really sad that there is so much stigma and disinformation out there about DID, because we're not what you see in movies like Split or Fight Club. We're not hallucinating our alters. We don't have superpowers. We can't switch on command. And we're not trends like you see on TikTok and other social media. We're just people. Really badly hurt people trying to cope with our pasts, ourselves, and the fact we're all stuck in one body and one life. And this idea that there's an original version of me, a core identity, isn't factual. Me, the person sitting in front of the camera right now talking to you, I'm probably the person in my system that you see the most, meet the most, communicate with the most, the person that you know. But I am just as much of an alter as every other person within my system. This goes back to the trauma model of DID. Systems like us don't get the chance to form a single identity because of our trauma. We have always been a system of alters. Part of the reason DID is so stigmatized and invalidated, part of the reason that systems like us are accused of faking it, is because DID is discrete. It's meant to be discrete because survival means discretion. If it was obvious we have DID, we wouldn't have made it this far. And in the past, when we have told people that we trust that we are a system, it's been used against us in other traumatic ways. Truth is, if you know us personally or you've seen us across social media, you've likely met a lot of the alters in my system and not even known it, because you are not supposed to know. That's part of DID's purpose. One of the most frustrating aspects of DID is that alters are not generally recognized as individual people, but we are. Just like you and me are different individual people, so are alters in a system. Each of my alters is just as much of a person as I am, or you are. We have different preferences, different religious and spiritual beliefs, political beliefs, different favorite colors and favorite book genres, different sexualities and styles. We respond to situations differently, process emotions differently, cope with our disorders differently. Some alters in other systems have completely different physical conditions like eyesight. One alter could be able to see perfectly fine, and another alter may need glasses, and another alter is blind. And this, by the way, is proven by studies and brain scans. This is how individual we are. Since DID develops as a survival mechanism, each alter's role is dependent upon the body's different survival needs. So, for example, me, Sage, I'm the primary host of our system. My role is to manage everyday life, most social situations, but another person in my system, Crash, is a protector. His job is to protect us from both internal and external threats, hold trauma that I can't handle or that the unconscious part of the system dictates that I can't handle. And Crash also carries a lot of anger that I can't even feel and definitely can't cope with. There's another alter in our system, Goofy, who keeps our humor alive when it feels so far away. Another person in my system exists for the sole purpose of eating, because we were starved as a child and we still struggle today with an eating disorder. We have a pretty big system, so I could keep going on and giving you a million different examples, but I think that expresses my point, which is that every alter in a system serves a purpose that was originally intended for survival, even if that survival role isn't necessarily needed anymore, which can make things complicated and difficult. Some alters hold on to trauma that the rest of us can't process. Some alters embody strong emotions that others of us can't feel and survive at the same time. Some of us have roles that seem simple, like eating, because everyday things like that can be very difficult to manage. Just because alters are individual people and have roles that are meant to help us function doesn't mean that DID isn't a disorder. It is a disorder, because having DID means dealing with symptoms like dissociation, dissociative fugue, amnesia, memory loss, confusion, compartmentalization of trauma, social dysregulation, complications in self-awareness, disconnected thoughts, disawareness of surroundings, disorientation, and the list just keeps going. Not to mention that DID has a strong comorbidity with other mental health disorders like anxiety, panic, PTSD, complex PTSD, things like triggers and flashbacks, depression and self-harm and eating disorders and suicidal ideation and paranoia, and a whole host of other mental health disorders. And again, both of these lists can just go on and on. That's why DID is a disorder. A lot of us systems don't want to be one person. Our system definitely doesn't, because can you imagine how scary the idea is of not being yourself, not being your own person, not having your own identity? It's the same for us. We don't want to lose our individual selves in the process of healing. We just want to communicate, cooperate on our mutual goals, maybe decrease dissociation, and learn how to function in daily life, individually and as a system together. That is why we're coming clean. We are finally in a place of life where we are secure enough in our communication and who we are as individuals and a system to be more open about our system, about ourselves. And we're tired of pretending to be this one person, this face, this mask that you see when you look at us, even if you don't know that's what you're seeing. We're not one person. We're us.